You know that feeling when you are completely, almost overwhelmingly trapped in a career box?
Oh, yeah, the box.
Right. It is this very specific kind of um, professional claustrophobia. Sure. Imagine you are standing in the middle of your office or, maybe just sitting on an endless video call.
Like we all do.
Right. And you realize with this sudden sinking feeling that your boss and your coworkers only see you as exactly one thing.
You're typecast.
Yes. You're the numbers person.
Hmm?
Or you're the reliable executor. Or maybe you're the creative who supposedly can't manage a spreadsheet.
Right.
And, deep down, you have the capacity to do something totally different. But you feel like you are wearing a uniform you didn't choose. And the terrifying truth we are exploring today with you, our listener, is that if you don't aggressively strip off that uniform, your colleagues will gladly nail you into it for the next 30 years.
They absolutely will. I mean, it is an incredibly isolating experience, but it is far more common than most people are willing to admit out loud.
Because it feels like a failure. Right.
Exactly. You feel typecast. And the psychological reality is that the longer you play the role they have assigned you, the thicker the walls of that box become.
Wow. Yeah.
People rely on you to be the character they understand. It reduces their cognitive load.
Yeah.
When you try to step out of character, they subconsciously resist it.
Because it's inconvenient for them.
Right. They want you back in the box because a predictable you makes their lives easier.
That makes so much sense. It's not even malicious. It's just human nature to want to quickly categorize people. And this is exactly where I find myself, and I know so many of you listening are right there with me. I mean, I am incredibly curious. I'm ambitious. I want to pivot.
Which is great.
Yeah, but maybe I want to move from a highly technical background into real strategic leadership. But there is this gnawing, paralyzing fear at the back of my mind.
The fear of looking foolish.
Yes. How do you pivot without looking totally foolish? I have this nightmare that if I suddenly announce I'm a completely new professional, people are going to, roll their eyes and think I'm having some sort of mid-career crisis.
Well, that fear of looking calculated or foolish is completely valid, but we really have to contextualize where that fear comes from.
Okay. Where does it come from?
It originates from a fundamentally outdated model of how careers are supposed to work. I mean, the era of the gold watch, the lifetime employment, the 30-year tenure at a single company where a benevolent manager slowly guides your ascent, that is dead.
It's long gone.
It is entirely a relic of the past. If you look at the research from Harvard Business School's Thomas DeLonge, he points out a critical structural shift that has happened in the corporate landscape.
What kind of shift?
Well, over the past few decades, as senior executives were forced to take on more and more responsibilities, professional mentorship precipitously declined. Executives simply stopped making time to cultivate rising talent.
I would guess that's just a symptom of modern corporate burnout, right?
Yeah.
They aren't mentoring because they're too busy just trying to survive their own escalating workloads.
And their quarterly targets. That is the exact mechanism driving this. And the result of that vacuum is that executives and professionals at all levels have been forced to see themselves as free agents.
Free agents. I like that term.
Yeah, because if the company isn't investing in a 30-year path for you, you can no longer say, oh, I'll just stay here, do good work, and wait for them to notice my hidden talents.
Right. Nobody is coming to save you.
Nobody. You are a free agent navigating a rapidly shifting corporate lattice, not a ladder. And as a free agent, the only way to survive is through continuous strategic reinvention.
Okay, so if we're all free agents in this chaotic lattice, we need a playbook. I mean, we can't just wing it. We need to know how to actually change the narrative without alienating the people around us.
Exactly.
So we are pulling from an incredible set of sources today, anchored by the insights in Reinventing You by Dorie Clark. Our goal, really the mission of this deep dive today, is to decode the psychology and the highly actionable strategy of changing how the world sees you professionally.
It's a fantastic blueprint.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we get into the actual tactics of changing our brand, I feel like we have to clear a massive psychological hurdle. We have to talk about how the term personal branding just sounds,
Gross.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Gross.
The sleaze factor. Yes. The deeply ingrained idea that personal branding is a dirty word reserved for, social media influencers and reality television stars.
Exactly what I picture.
There is a fascinating anecdote in the source material about an executive who emailed Dorie Clark. He wanted to be interviewed for her research, but he insisted on remaining entirely anonymous.
Right, why?
Because he firmly believed that if he was seen talking about his personal brand, it would actively destroy his personal brand.
That is painfully ironic.
Isn't it?
It feels like breaking the fourth wall in a play.
Mm.
You are supposed to acknowledge the machinery behind the acting. You're just supposed to be the character.
Yeah.
And honestly, I completely relate to that anonymous executive.
A lot of people do.
Yeah. There is a philosophy, that let's call it the William Simon approach, that just feels more dignified. Simon was the former U.S. Treasury Secretary, wildly successful Wall Street investor, and he famously declared that he was never interested in merchandising himself.
Right.
His whole philosophy was keep your head down, work incredibly hard, be excellent at what you do, and completely ignore your public image.
And, you know, for a child of the Great Depression who peaked professionally before the internet era, that was a perfectly noble, functional strategy. The environment allowed for it.
Right. And part of me thinks that's how it should be. Isn't there something genuinely noble about just letting your work speak for itself?
In theory, yes.
Because whenever I hear the phrase personal branding, I immediately picture that insufferable person at a networking event.
We all know the one.
The one who manages to tell you within 3 minutes that they went to an Ivy League school, drive a BMW, and know the CEO personally.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like foghorning your credentials.
Foghorning, I love that.
Yeah, actively managing what people think of me feels dangerously close to becoming that foghorn person.
Well, we really need to separate the psychology of foghorning from the strategy of branding.
Okay, how so?
Foghorning is rooted in deep insecurity and a complete lack of social calibration. It is trying to force a reality onto an audience. What William Simon championed, keeping your head down and just doing good work, worked in an era where office structures were rigid.
Right.
Think about it. In 1975, your direct manager sat down the hall. They reviewed every single project you touched, and they had full visibility into your lifelong career track within a single organization.
Because there were only like 3 layers of management, nobody was remote.
Exactly.
And they certainly weren't receiving 400 Slack messages a day.
Precisely. It is the exact opposite of today. Today, we exist in a fragmented, remote, highly matrixed, internet-driven world. Your manager might be in a different time zone.
Or a different country.
Right. And they might only see a fraction of your actual output. In this modern attention economy, if you just keep your head down and silently do good work, you are committing professional suicide.
Because visibility is just as important as capability now.
It is arguably more important, especially in the initial stages of opportunity creation. I mean, there are countless talented, qualified people out there. If you aren't strategic about getting the word out in a thoughtful, value additive way, someone else is going to win.
Someone less talented.
Usually, yes. Someone who might be significantly less talented but far more visible will win the accolades, the promotions, and the opportunities. Personal branding isn't about spin.
It's not.
No, it is about taking control of your narrative. It is ensuring that the outside world's perception of you accurately matches the reality of your skills and ambitions.
So whether we like the term or not, we just have to accept that the brand exists. We don't get to opt out of having a brand.
There is zero opting out. The source material highlights a brilliant quote from angel investor Judy Robinette. She says, "If 3 people tell you you're a horse, buy a saddle."
Oh, wow. That is incredibly blunt. Buy a saddle.
It is profound, though, because it strips away our internal delusions. You already have a personal brand. It exists in the minds of your coworkers, your boss, your industry peers.
Right.
The only question is whether you are in the driver's seat controlling that brand or if you are letting it passively control you. If 3 people think you are disorganized, you are, for all professional intents and purposes, disorganized. Your brand is disorganized.
Even if I sit at my desk silently fuming, thinking, but I have a color-coded planner.
Yeah.
I'm highly organized.
It literally doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all. The perception is the reality I have to operate within.
Yeah.
But, accepting that reality leads directly to the most terrifying part of this entire process.
An audit.
Yeah. If I have to accept what people think of me, I first have to actually find out what people think of me.
You must face the uncomfortable truth of the brand audit. It is the diagnostic foundation of any reinvention. You cannot map a route to a new destination if you don't have an accurate, unvarnished GPS pin drop of where you are currently standing.
It's like looking in a mirror but realizing everyone else in the office is seeing a funhouse version of you.
Exactly.
The proportions are all wrong. Like, they see a giant head of creativity, but tiny little legs of follow-through. And the scariest way to find this out is through what the book calls the 360 interview.
Right. Now, the 360 interview is traditionally conducted by external executive coaches. They go into a company, promise complete anonymity to your colleagues, bosses, and subordinates, and ferret out the unvarnished truth about your performance and personality.
Which sounds great if the company pays for it.
Exactly. But if you are a free agent, like we talked about, without the corporate budget for an executive coach, you have to conduct a personal 360 interview yourself. And that requires an immense amount of vulnerability.
I honestly cannot imagine sitting down with a coworker and saying, hey, tell me everything that's wrong with me.
It goes against every instinct.
It really does.
Yeah.
Human beings are biologically and social conditioned to sugarcoat. We want tribal harmony. If I ask my friend at work how I am doing, they're going to say, oh, you're great. You work so hard. How do you actually bypass the polite lies to get to the data you need?
You bypass it through structured inquiry. The executive coach, Michael Melcher, suggests a specific strategy of paired questions.
Paired questions.
Yes, this is brilliant psychological maneuvering. If you just ask, what are my weaknesses? You put the other person in a state of high social friction. It feels confrontational.
Or just deeply awkward.
Very awkward. But if you sit down and say, I am interviewing you for my professional development. I need you to answer these paired questions. What is my absolute greatest strength and what is definitively not my strength? What career could you easily see me in? And what career could you definitely never see me in?
Oh, I see how the mechanics of that work. The paired structure gives them a permission structure to be negative.
Precisely.
By sandwiching the critique with a compliment, by making it this binary exercise, it feels less like a personal attack and more like an objective analytical game.
It drastically lowers the cognitive load and the social friction of delivering bad news. And if you still feel them pulling punches, if they're still giving you corporate platitudes, there is an incredibly effective trick from New York-based coach Elisa Cohn. She says you have to rat yourself out first.
Wait, rat yourself out, meaning I have to essentially bleed in front of them so they know it's safe. Give me an example of how you actually rat yourself out in a professional conversation.
Okay, let's say you sit down with a trusted colleague who you know is holding back. Instead of waiting for them to critique you, you take the lead. You say, look, I'm really trying to develop myself for the next level. I heard in the past that I can be too tactical, that I get stuck in the weeds, and that I completely lack strategic vision. How you seen that in my work? Do you agree with that assessment?
Wow.
By introducing the negative concept yourself, you provide a safe container for them to just nod and elaborate, rather than forcing them to be the villain who brings it up.
You are giving them the blueprint for the criticism. You're saying, it's okay, the door's already open, you can just walk through it. That takes a massive suspension of ego, though.
Huge.
You have to actively swallow your pride. But I can see how it would open the floodgates for real honesty. And some people take this concept even further, right? Let's talk about the focus group strategy, specifically the story of Mary Skelton Roberts.
Mary's story is an absolute masterclass in extreme self-auditing. She was an international conflict resolution expert who felt that classic claustrophobia you described at the start.
The career box.
Yes. She wanted to transition her career, but she wasn't sure to what. So instead of just doing one-on-one paired questions, she gathered 10 of her closest friends and trusted colleagues, people from completely different phases of her life.
Okay.
She invited them to her living room, fed them copious amounts of food, and brought in a friend to act as a neutral facilitator.
I just want you, the listener, to pause and picture this right now. You are sitting on your own couch, completely silent, while 10 people in your living room literally dissect your personality, your flaws, your hidden strengths, and your future potential.
It's intense.
The level of emotional fortitude that requires is staggering.
It is the ultimate vulnerability exercise. The facilitator handed out worksheets with prompts like, Mary's greatest gifts are, and the world would be a better place if Mary, and then forced the group to discuss their answers out loud, debating them in front of her.
And she couldn't say anything.
Her only job was to listen. She was strictly forbidden from arguing. She couldn't defend herself. She couldn't explain her past actions. She could only take in the raw data.
I feel like my natural instinct would be to constantly interrupt and say, well, the only reason I did that project that way was because of the budget.
Of course. We all want to defend ourselves.
But she had to just swallow it. What did she actually gain from putting herself through this trial by fire?
The insights were revelatory, and they altered the course of both her professional and personal life. Professionally, the group pointed out a massive blind spot. They noted that while she was highly intellectual and analytical, they saw a deeply creative, expressive side to her that was entirely suppressed in her current conflict resolution work.
Oh, interesting.
They envisioned her writing children's books or running high-level political campaigns. It gave her the objective data she needed to refocus her consulting practice toward training and development, which satisfied that latent creative urge.
But there was a personal revelation, too, wasn't there? This is where the audit breached the professional wall and became incredibly intimate.
Yes, and this highlights exactly why you bring in people from different spheres of your life. During the session, someone looked at her and said, "I want to see you with a child. I think you should explore that." Up until that moment, Mary wasn't sure she even wanted kids. It wasn't on her immediate radar. But hearing her dream team of trusted confidants reflect that hidden capacity for motherhood back to her made it suddenly real and relevant. A year and a half later, she had a daughter.
It just shows how blindly we move through our own lives. We are so close to the canvas, our noses are literally touching it, so we can only see the individual brushstrokes of our daily tasks. The focus group steps 20 feet back and sees the entire painting.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
But, while we are talking about how others see us, we have to talk about the biases inherent in those perceptions. Because the data we get from our colleagues isn't pure. It is filtered through a lot of societal baggage. Let's dig into the likability conundrum.
This is a critical and often deeply frustrating layer of the brand audit. As you gather this 360 data, you have to filter it through the reality of societal stereotypes. Harvard Business School professor Amy Cuddy has done extensive psychological research on this.
And what does she find?
She found that in many professional environments, warmth and competence are viewed by our brains as inversely related.
Wait, meaning that if people think you are incredibly nice, empathetic, and warm, they subconsciously assume you must not be very competent, sharp, or decisive.
Sadly, yes. The human brain struggles to hold those two traits in high esteem simultaneously, and this cognitive bias disproportionately impacts female professionals.
I could absolutely see that.
Women are culturally trained and often professionally expected to be warm, collaborative, and accommodating. But when performance evaluations come around, that very warmth is weaponized against them.
How so?
The source text references a highly revealing psychological study of Wall Street law firms. When reviewing junior attorneys, the written comments for women were effusive in their praise of interpersonal skills. They were great team players, highly collaborative. But the male attorneys received significantly higher overall numerical ratings for technical competence and analytical rigor.
And let me guess which metric actually determines who makes partner at a cutthroat law firm. The numerical rating for competence, not the written paragraph about being a great team player.
Exactly. It creates an impossible double bind. And this leads to a tragic story in the research about a reference call for a woman named Kelly. It perfectly encapsulates the danger of having the wrong kind of positive brand.
I remember reading this and cringing. Walk us through the exact words used in that reference call, because the vocabulary here is the entire point.
So Kelly was up for a major corporate role. Her former boss gave him a glowing reference. He genuinely wanted to help her. He called her a wonderful girl, praised her terrific personality, and explicitly stated she was a delight to work with.
I mean, on the surface, that sounds lovely. Who doesn't want to be known as a delight?
You want to be a delight at a neighborhood dinner party. You do not want to be delight when competing for a high-stakes corporate leadership role.
Good point.
In the context of a hiring decision, delightful is a proxy for weak, compliant, and non-threatening. If Kelly is up against a male candidate whose reference praises his extraordinary competence, his relentless drive, and his passion for winning, Kelly's brand of warmth will cost her the job.
Yeah, no senior male executive is ever described in a reference call as a wonderful boy who is a delight to have around.
Never. You have to listen very closely to the specific adjectives people use for you during your audit and ask yourself, are these the adjectives of power in my specific industry?
So it's not just about what your friends and colleagues say to your face. We have to parse the hidden meaning behind their compliments. But there's another layer to this audit. It's not just the people in your immediate orbit. It's about how the broader world, especially the algorithms, perceive you when you aren't in the room.
The digital footprint.
Yeah, because I have a sneaking suspicion that what my friends say to my face is vastly different from what a hiring algorithm sees when it scans my name.
You are absolutely right to be paranoid about that. The digital shadow we all cast is permanent, and it is deep. You might think your brand is just what happens in the office from 9 to 5, or what you choose to post on your polished LinkedIn profile. But companies are now routinely utilizing specialized background check firms like social intelligence.
Social intelligence.
Yeah, they don't just look at the first page of Google, they scrape the deep web. They look at up to 7 years of your entire internet history.
7 years. That is a lifetime in internet years.
Yeah.
7 years ago, I was a completely different person with completely different opinions.
And these firms are pulling up comments you left on obscure blogs in 2019, archives of dead Yahoo. Groups, your old Craigslist transactions, they are looking for patterns of behavior, signs of poor judgment, or aggressive communication styles.
Wow.
What's fascinating here is that less than a third of the negative content they dredge up comes from major sites like Facebook or Twitter.
Why is that?
Because people know to police their major social media. We curate our Instagrams, but the background checkers find the mistakes in the digital spaces where candidates felt a false sense of security or perceived anonymity. The unmasking effect of a niche forum often reveals a person's true communication style far better than a curated resume.
That is terrifying. It means you are being audited on your worst Tuesday from 5 years ago. And the scariest part is, sometimes a disastrous digital brand isn't even your fault. What about the story of the Ivy League graduate whose career was essentially hijacked?
Oh, this is a prime example of why you must aggressively Google yourself. There was a brilliant young woman, an Ivy League grad, looking for a job in marketing. On paper, her resume was flawless, but she had a deranged ex-boyfriend who had gone on a malicious digital rampage, posting defamatory, sexually explicit, and horrific things about her across various obscure websites.
That's awful.
And because she had a relatively distinctive name, the moment any hiring manager Googled her to prepare for an interview, they were instantly hit with a barrage of these unhinged posts.
It's an absolute nightmare. Your personal brand, your entire professional viability, held hostage by someone else's malice. And the hiring manager isn't going to call you and ask for your side of the story.
No, they won't.
They're just going to silently move on to the next resume in the stack.
Exactly. She was pursuing legal action to get the content removed, but the legal system moves slowly. In the interim, it made her job search incredibly difficult. The lesson here is that you cannot assume your digital brand is clean just because you, personally, haven't done anything wrong.
You have to audit yourself digitally.
You have to hunt down this information yourself. You need to scroll back to page 26 of your Google search results. You need to search for variations and common misspellings of your name. You must know what the algorithm says about you before a potential employer does.
Okay, so let's take a breath and look at where we are. We have gathered a mountain of data. We have the uncomfortable paired questions from our colleagues. We have parsed the biased adjectives in our performance reviews. And we have survived the terrifying deep web scrape.
It's a lot of data.
It is. So how do we actually synthesize this? If one person says I'm a visionary and another says I'm a micromanager, how do I look at this conflicting feedback and not just completely panic?
The key to synthesis is overriding the human tendency to focus on the outlier. Our brains naturally fixate on the one negative comment in a sea of praise. But you are looking for patterns, not outliers. If one former boss from 5 years ago says you are disorganized, but 20 other people across your career say you are meticulous, you can confidently dismiss that one boss as an anomaly.
Maybe they were just a bad boss.
Exactly. They might have been projecting their own chaos onto you, or the team environment was fundamentally flawed.
But what if it's not an anomaly?
That's the hard part. If 5 different people from 5 different phases of your life, your college roommate, your first boss, and your current direct report all say you have a hard time delegating, you have a problem. You have to accept it as a core, undeniable component of your current brand.
Right, if 3 people tell you your horse, buy a saddle. But once I buy the saddle, what do we actually do with it? Let's say my synthesized brand is, as we discussed with the likability conundrum, nice and methodical.
Being nice and methodical is a wonderful brand if your goal is to stay in a mid-level execution role forever.
Right, but what if I want more?
If your goal is to transition into the C-suite, nice and methodical is a catastrophic brand mismatch. The C-suite requires a brand categorized by adjectives of power: decisive, visionary, authoritative, resilient. Your synthesis phase is about identifying the delta, the gap between the adjectives you currently own and the adjectives required for the destination you want to reach.
Okay, so we have faced the music. We know exactly where we were starting, flaws, bad internet footprints and all. Now we need to figure out where we're going. We need to research our escape route.
Yeah.
But I feel like I have to do this covertly.
You do.
I can't just walk into my boss's office on a Tuesday and announce, hey, I'm researching how to escape this department. Do you have any tips? How do we map the new path? without tipping our hand at work and looking completely disengaged.
The very first step of researching your escape route is incredibly counterintuitive. Before you research anything, you might actually need to do nothing.
Yeah, do nothing. That sounds like a terrible strategy when I'm desperate to leave.
Let me explain the psychology behind it with a story from career counselor Phyllis Stein. She had a client who was a solo practice veterinarian. This woman had been on call dealing with animal emergencies 7 days a week for 14 years.
Oh my gosh.
She was so profoundly burnt out that her opening line to the career counselor was, "I don't ever want to see another animal again. Get me out of veterinary medicine." She was desperate to plot a completely new career course immediately.
I completely understand that urgency. When you are in pain, you just want to run in any direction that isn't where you currently are. It's the fight or flight response.
But running while your brain is soaked in adrenaline and exhaustion leads to terrible, reactive decisions. When you are in survival mode, your limbic system is hijacked and you suffer from tunnel vision. You cannot plot a creative, strategic new course.
So what did the counselor do?
Stein recognized this and refused to help her plot a new career. She told the vet to go away, take a 9-month sabbatical to physically and mentally recover from 14 years of lost sleep, and come back when her nervous system was reset.
That is a massive leap of faith to just stop. What happened when she came back?
When the veterinarian came back almost a year later, rested and clear-headed, she had a completely different perspective. She quickly realized she didn't hate animals at all. She simply hated the grueling, isolating grind of a solo practice.
Oh, so the problem wasn't the field, it was the format.
Exactly. With her energy restored, she made a nuanced pivot rather than a desperate leap. She transitioned into becoming an international public health veterinarian, traveling the world and dealing with macro-level animal health issues.
So step 1 is heal the burnout before you change the blueprint. But once you have your baseline energy back, how do you actually start scanning the horizon?
You begin with behind-the-scenes research. You do not talk to people yet. You start by stalking the biographies of people you deeply admire who hold the roles you want.
I love this part. I am a professional LinkedIn stalker. I love tracing the exact chronological timeline of someone who has the job I want.
It is a highly effective, low-risk strategy. You are looking for the structural common denominators of success in your target field. The text mentions an executive who wanted to dramatically elevate his career profile. He reverse-engineered the success of his idols. He realized they all seemed to share certain esoteric credentials, like being a White House fellow, or they shared specific personal habits, like running marathons. So he didn't just ask them for advice, he matched their regimen exactly.
He literally copied their resume building blocks.
Yes. He applied and became a White House fellow. He started running marathons and ended up raising over $1 million for charity. He essentially cloned the infrastructure of their success. You read the industry blogs they read. You learn the specific jargon of the new field. You do this exhaustive pre-work so that when you do finally secure a meeting with someone, you aren't wasting their time asking basic, Googleable questions.
Right. If I finally get a meeting with a top corporate lawyer, I shouldn't ask, so what's it like being a lawyer? That shows I haven't done the work. I want to ask them about a specific, nuanced regulatory shift in their sector to show I already speak their language. Which brings us to the most powerful tool for reality testing this escape route, the informational interview.
Crucial step.
But I have to confess, the idea of doing informational interviews sounds exhausting and honestly a bit intimidating. What if I sit down with my idol and they tell me my dream job is actually a nightmare?
That is exactly what you want them to tell you if it's the truth. The informational interview is not a networking schmooze fest. It is a rigorous reality check. Look at the experience of Karen Landolt. She worked as a high-powered corporate attorney before transitioning to running a university career services office.
Yeah.
Students would come into her office starry-eyed, saying, "I want to work at Goldman Sachs," and she would ask them a simple question. "Who have you talked to there?" The students would admit they hadn't talked to anyone, but they knew it was prestigious and paid incredibly well.
Of course.
Landolt would reply, "Yes, they make extraordinary money, but they also work 120 hours a week. Have you talked to anyone who is awake at 3 a.m. on a Sunday doing financial modeling? Because that is the reality of the job."
It strips the glossy PR veneer away. You're interviewing to find out the reality of a random Tuesday afternoon, not the fantasy of the job title. But here is my biggest practical issue with informational interviews. I don't have a golden Rolodex. If I'm an accountant who wants to pivot into cutting-edge tech marketing, I don't know the heavy hitters in that industry. How am I supposed to get these meetings if I don't have the network?
If you don't have the network, you have to engineer it. This is where we look at the sheer tactical brilliance of Elizabeth Amini. She was a cognitive science major who realized medicine was a terrible fit for her, and she felt totally adrift at age 30. She decided to rigorously test multiple new career paths by securing 5 to 10 data points informational interviews for each potential industry.
But she didn't know anyone.
Right. But like you, she didn't know anyone, so she cold called. But she didn't cold call blindly.
Let me guess, she just blasted her resume to the generic HR inbox and prayed.
Not even close. That is a guaranteed way to be ignored. She used brilliant social engineering to bypass the standard roadblocks. She would call corporate offices after hours, when the receptionists were gone, specifically to navigate the automated voicemail directory and figure out the direct extension numbers of the top executive.
That is borderline corporate espionage, and I am entirely here for it.
It gets much better. Once she had the lay of the land, she knew she shouldn't aim for the CEO, who is too heavily guarded. And she didn't want to talk to middle management because they lack the high-level strategic perspective. She aimed for the chief operating officer's office. She would call the COO's secretary. But she didn't ask to speak to the COO.
What did she ask?
She would say, I know the COO is incredibly busy, but who is your absolute rock star marketing person? Who is the best salesperson you have on the floor?
Oh, wow. I see the logic. The COO secretary is the central nervous system of the company. They know everyone who actually performs, regardless of title.
Exactly. And then, armed with a specific name, Elizabeth would call that rock star marketing person. When they picked up, she could truthfully say, hi, the COO's office recommended I speak with you.
That is unbelievable leverage. That marketing director is never going to blow off a meeting that they think was endorsed, even implicitly, by the COO's office. It's leveraging borrowed authority.
It's a genius.
But even with tactics like that to get your foot in the door, finding a true mentor, someone who will actually guide your reinvention, feels like waiting to win the lottery. I want someone to take me under their wing, but I feel like I'm just waiting around for a Gandalf figure to arrive, recognize my hidden genius, and choose me.
And we have to accept that Gandalf is not coming. We have to completely dispel the myth of the gray-haired senior executive tapping you on the shoulder. Mentorship today is much more fluid, decentralized, and highly non-traditional. Mentors can be found anywhere, even below you on the organizational chart.
Below you. Like reverse mentoring. How does that even work when they have less experience?
Because they have different, hyper-specific experience. Look at the story of Hank Philippi Ryan. She was a massively successful Emmy-winning TV investigative reporter in Boston, a true titan in her local media market.
Okay.
But she had this secret, unfulfilled desire to write mystery novels. She had the ambition, but she didn't know the mechanics of the fiction publishing world. Her mentor turned out to be her 27-year-old intern.
Wait, an intern mentoring a seasoned Emmy winner? The ego dynamics there must have been wild.
It worked because Hank suspended her ego. The intern was writing a romance novel on the side and asked Hank to help edit it. Hank started spending her off hours editing this young woman's book, and as she saw the mechanics of the manuscript come together, a profound realization hit her. If this 27-year-old has the discipline to write a book, I can absolutely write a book.
So she learned by doing.
Exactly. The intern taught her the modern software, the pacing of fiction, and the submission process. It was a moment of inspiration and tactical learning that flowed entirely upward. When the student is truly ready to reinvent themselves, the teacher appears, even if the teacher is the person currently fetching your coffee.
So we've audited our current brand, we've healed our burnout, we have reality tested our escape route through these ingenious informational interviews and unlikely mentors. Now comes the moment of truth. We know our destination, but we can't just walk into work on Monday and announce, I am no longer an accountant, I am now a brand strategist. People's brains will short-circuit. They won't believe you. You have to build a psychological bridge. You need a transition narrative.
The transition narrative is the psychological linchpin of the entire reinvention process. Human beings are inherently skeptical and deeply averse to cognitive dissonance. If your past experience and your proposed future do not connect in a logical, linear way, people will reject your new identity. You have to actively translate your past experience into the exact language of your future goals.
I want to dive deep into this translation concept, because going from accounting to finance is an easy bridge. But what about a massive, seemingly illogical leap?
Let's look at the incredible story of Toby Johnson. She graduated from West Point and spent 7 years as an Apache helicopter pilot in the U.S. Army. She was the only woman in a class of 30 trainees. She flew intense combat tours in Iraq, and she managed multi-million-dollar aircraft.
She sounds incredible.
She was elite. But when she left the military to attend business school and enter the corporate world, she realized she was competing against classmates who had spent those exact same 7 years seamlessly climbing the corporate ladder at McKinsey or Goldman Sachs.
Right. I can see the hiring manager at a consumer goods company looking at her resume and thinking, okay, she's clearly brave, but we don't need someone to launch Hellfire missiles at our competitors. How does flying a helicopter help me sell more soap? It's like she's holding $1 million in foreign military currency. It's incredibly valuable, but if she doesn't find a way to exchange it at the border into corporate dollars, she's functionally broke in this new country.
Yeah.
The hiring manager only accepts corporate dollars.
That is the perfect metaphor. The narrative is the exchange rate. Toby had to actively translate her military grit into undeniable corporate value. If she just talked about flying, she would lose. So she crafted a narrative that focused strictly on crisis management and high-stakes leadership.
How did she frame it?
She explained that at age 24, while her corporate peers were formatting PowerPoint slides, she wasn't just flying a helicopter. She was managing $30 million in highly sensitive assets and leading a team of 30 people in literal life-or-death situations. She framed her military time as an accelerated, high-stakes leadership laboratory.
Wow, that's powerful.
She argued that while her peers were just now trying out management for the first time and making costly beginner mistakes, her leadership style, her ability to make decisions under extreme pressure, was already battle-tested.
She completely flipped the script.
Yeah.
She made her unconventional, non-corporate background her primary competitive advantage. She didn't hide the military part. She decoded it for them so they could understand the ROI she brought. And there was another story in the source material about someone jumping from the ivory tower of academia to corporate consulting, right? Libby Wagner. That seems like an even harder translation.
Libby Wagner's story is fascinating because the cultural divide is so vast. She was a tenured community college professor teaching poetry and women's studies. She had achieved the academic holy grail of ultimate job security.
But she wanted out.
After a profound personal tragedy, her sister died, she realized life was too short to stay in a comfortable box. She needed a drastic change, and she decided to transition into management consulting.
Which sounds completely absurd on the surface. How do you go from analyzing Walt Whitman to optimizing global supply chains? MBA types do not historically hang out with poets.
And Libby was acutely aware of that bias. She knew the corporate world would instantly reject a poet as too soft or theoretical, so she intentionally found a stepping stone, a management boot camp, to legitimize her translation. During her time in academia, she had developed a specialized statewide program for instructor development. The State Department of Corrections saw this program and recruited her to oversee employee training for the prison system.
Wait, from poetry to the prison system. That is a pivot within a pivot.
It was a strategic masterstroke. The prison system was a petri dish of the most complex, intense, high-stakes employee management issues imaginable. She deliberately used that grueling environment to learn the language of management, to understand massive budgets, rigid hierarchies, and crisis resolution.
That's incredibly smart.
When she eventually pitched herself to corporate clients as a management consultant, her narrative wasn't, "I'm a sensitive poet who wants to consult." Her narrative was, "I'm a hardened expert in complex employee development who has built and optimized programs for both higher education and the state penal system."
She focused entirely on the concrete value she brought to them. She didn't make it a narcissistic, navel-gazing journey of finding herself. And that is such a critical distinction for anyone listening. If I go to a hiring manager and say, "I'm pivoting into your industry because I really need to find my true passion," they do not care.
You better care at all.
They are not my therapist. They only care about how my supposedly translated skills will affect their bottom line. But let me challenge this requirement for a logical narrative. What if my transition isn't a logical bridge? What if it's completely abrupt, driven by chaos, and there's no clever way to translate my past?
What you are describing is what the literature refers to as the road to Damascus moment. Sometimes the transition is harsh, shocking, and entirely defies corporate logic. And in those rare cases, attempting to craft a slick corporate narrative will backfire because it will feel inauthentic. The only narrative you can offer is the raw, profound truth of a life-altering event.
The source material mentions a young woman who wanted to be in the music industry. Her story really stuck with me.
Yes, it's a powerful example of this dynamic. Phyllis Stein was counseling a young woman in her early 20s who desperately wanted to break into the music business. But during their sessions, it became clear her reasoning was incredibly shallow. She just wanted the glamour, the late-night parties, the VIP backstage passes.
She was just in it for the fun.
She was ungrounded and lacked any real work ethic. After a few frustrating sessions, she vanished. Stein didn't hear from her for 6 months. When the young woman finally returned to the counseling office, everything about her physical presence and energy had changed.
I originally thought she just went to LA, got chewed up by the industry, and came back humbled. But it was far more severe than that.
Infinitely more severe. She had been in a horrific, near-fatal car crash. She spent months in the hospital and in grueling physical recovery, forced to face her own mortality at 22. When she came back to career counseling, the superficial desire for glamour had been completely burned away.
Right.
She still wanted to work in the music industry, but now she had a deep, grounded purpose. The trauma had fundamentally reorganized her neurological priorities. She didn't need to craft a clever MBA-style narrative bridging her past and future. Her narrative was simply the profound, undeniable truth of her survival and her radical new perspective on the value of time and art.
When a transition is born of that kind of literal fire, people instinctively recognize the authenticity of it. You don't have to spin a car crash. It is the ultimate undeniable narrative.
Absolutely.
But for most of us, who are thankfully just dealing with standard career malaise rather than near-death experiences, a great translated narrative only gets your foot in the door. You can tell a brilliant story about why an accountant should be a marketing director, using the currency exchange metaphor, but you have to actually prove you can do the marketing work before anyone gives you the title and the salary. You have to prove it before you are it.
This is the critical transition from theory to practice. You have to cultivate the actual hard skills, and you almost always have to do it outside the boundaries of your current day-to-day job.
Which brings up a huge pain point. Cultivating new skills usually sounds like going back to grad school for 2 years. And that is incredibly expensive, and for someone mid-career, often completely unrealistic.
It can be, and more importantly, it is often entirely unnecessary. Look at the strategy of Joel Gagne. He was running a company and decided he needed to drastically level up his communication and strategic skills to land bigger clients. He could have gone back to university and finished his master's degree in government.
Which takes years.
It would have looked great on a resume, but when he deeply analyzed what he actually needed to succeed in his reinvention, he realized a theoretical master's thesis on political science wouldn't help him close a business deal. He needed to know how to write a killer, persuasive proposal and how to command attention in a boardroom. So he bypassed the expensive, time-consuming degree and took highly targeted, non-credit business writing classes.
It's treating your skill development like a surgical strike rather than carpet bombing. You only acquire the specific tools required for the immediate mission.
Yes, exactly.
But even with the right targeted skills, if you are jumping between fields, how do you psychologically handle the fact that you will always have less direct chronological experience than the people who have been in that new industry for 20 years? Imposter syndrome must be overwhelming.
You defeat imposter syndrome by actively leveraging your outsider status. Instead of apologizing for your lack of traditional experience, you weaponize your diverse background. Jason Chaplin is a prime example of this tactic.
What did he do?
His resume was, on the surface, a chaotic, unplannable mix. He had been a journalist, a diplomatic negotiator in North Korea, a presidential speechwriter, and a telecom executive. If he tried to compete for a CEO role with a lifelong, 30-year telecom veteran on raw telecom experience alone, he would lose every single time. But Jason realized his superpower was his eclectic, cross-functional background.
Because he possessed the linguistic and cultural fluency of multiple fields simultaneously.
Exactly. He could sit with a cutthroat hedge fund manager and speak pure finance, then walk into a governor's office an hour later and speak nuanced legislative politics, and then talk to engineers about infrastructure. He sold his ability to synthesize diverse worlds and see macro patterns that specialists miss. People were deeply intrigued by him. He gave them confidence because he knew enough about their specific field to be credible, but he brought a completely fresh, outsider perspective to the table that no corporate lifer could possibly offer.
That reframing is incredibly empowering. Your weird, winding, nonlinear career path isn't a liability you have to hide. It's a unique linguistic skill that makes you indispensable.
Yeah.
But once you have the targeted skills, and you have crafted this powerful narrative, you have to actually reintroduce yourself to your network. You can't just tell them. They have to experience the new you. You have to meticulously update your touch points.
Yes, your touch points are everywhere your personal brand interacts with the external world without your physical presence to defend it. Your voicemail recording, your LinkedIn banner, your personal website, the way you dress on Zoom calls, you have to audit them mercilessly for consistency.
Right.
If you are pivoting from a hyper-casual tech startup to a white-shoe conservative law firm, you cannot have a voicemail that says, hey, leave a message, whatever. It creates immediate cognitive dissonance.
There is a hilarious but deeply painful example of touch points gone wrong in the book. The consultant Alan Weiss was working with a client who desperately wanted to pivot and be taken seriously as a high-fee business speaker for senior executives. But the client kept subconsciously sabotaging himself and getting rejected.
Because the client insisted on using a talking puppet in his promotional videos and marketing materials.
A puppet. It is mind-boggling. You cannot walk into a boardroom of Fortune 500 CEOs to talk about optimizing quarterly earnings and then pull out a ventriloquist dummy. It is extreme cognitive dissonance. The touch points were actively destroying his credibility before he even opened his mouth. The medium is the message, and his medium was screaming amateur hour.
Which leads to a massive structural challenge for knowledge workers. If you are a graphic designer, changing your brand is relatively easy. You just show a portfolio of new logos you've designed. It's visual, it's immediate, the proof is right there.
Right.
But if you are a strategist, a project manager, or a leadership consultant, how do you visually prove your worth before they hire you?
You can't just hand a hiring manager a spreadsheet of your brilliant thoughts and say, trust me, I'm strategic now.
No, you have to actively create intellectual property. You have to publish content, write articles on LinkedIn, record a podcast, start an industry-specific newsletter. You have to put your professional philosophy out into the world so people can essentially test drive your brain before they commit to buying it. Dorie Clark herself provides a phenomenal example of this in the text.
What did she do?
Early in her career, she wanted to establish herself as an expert. She wrote an article for the Huffington Post, and in the article, she casually used the famous productivity guru David Allen, the creator of the Getting Things Done methodology, as a prime example of strong personal branding.
She didn't ask him for permission. She just provided high-level analysis of his work in a public forum. What was the result?
David Allen saw the article, appreciated the intellectual rigor of her analysis, and personally emailed her to thank her. That single piece of content sparked an ongoing, highly lucrative professional relationship. Creating content isn't just about showing off your new vocabulary. It acts as a homing beacon, attracting the exact people you want to connect with in your new industry.
It's networking on steroids, because it works while you are asleep. And it's also a backdoor way to generate validators. Because I can stand on a mountain and shout that I'm a strategic genius all day long, and it just sounds obnoxious and desperate. But if a titan like David Allen says I'm a genius, it's gospel.
The psychology and the behavioral science support this entirely. Researchers Jeffrey Pfeffer and Robert Cialdini have proven that self-promotion is inherently distasteful to the human brain.
Why is that, neurologically? Why do we instantly believe the third party, but roll our eyes if I say the exact same positive thing about myself?
It comes down to the evolutionary psychology of trust and hidden motives. If you promote yourself, my brain automatically filters your words through the knowledge that you have a vested selfish interest in my believing you. You gain status or money if I believe you.
So my guard goes up.
My cognitive guard goes up. But if a third party, especially someone I already respect, promotes you, that evolutionary friction vanishes. They have nothing to gain by lying about you. Therefore, their endorsement bypasses my critical filter, and I accept it as objective truth.
The halo effect.
This is the halo effect. Your goal in the real-world application phase is to do the side projects, write the articles, and impress the key players so much that they become your validators, speaking your new brand into existence in rooms you haven't even entered yet.
And this is where it all clicks together for me. If you're listening right now on your commute, and you have been stressing about how to afford quitting your job to reinvent yourself, this is how you safely test drive a brand. You don't have to quit your job and jump out of an airplane without a parachute.
No, absolutely not.
You volunteer for a task adjacent to your current role that uses your new skills. You write a white paper on Saturday morning. You do a covert informational interview with the COO's rockstar marketer on your lunch break. You build the parachute stitch by stitch while you are still safely standing on the ground.
It is incremental, it is strategic, and it is highly intentional risk mitigation.
Okay, here is where it gets incredibly visceral for me. My major aha moment synthesizing everything we have discussed today. If you do not intentionally define your own personal brand, someone else is going to define it for you.
They absolutely will.
And I promise you they are not going to do it generously. They will define it based on outdated information, on lazy societal stereotypes, or on a single mistake you made 3 years ago on a Tuesday afternoon when you were exhausted. The brand exists. The only variable left is who holds the pen.
That is the ultimate, undeniable takeaway. Abdicating control of your professional identity is a luxury you simply cannot afford in a modern free agent economy.
So we want to leave you, the listener, with a specific challenge. We want you to do something slightly terrifying, but incredibly powerful today. Right after you finish listening to this deep dive, pull out your phone. Pick 3 friends or trusted colleagues, people who know you well but will shoot straight with you, and text them this exact question. What 3 words would you use to describe me professionally?
Send it before you have time to overthink it and lose your nerve. The answers you receive will form the raw, unvarnished data of your starting point. It is the beginning of your personal brand audit. And as you receive those words and begin to plot your trajectory, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Reinvention is not a one-and-done event. It is not a box you check so you can relax for the next 20 years. It is a continuous, lifelong feedback loop. Even after you arrive at your newly desired destination, the corporate world will keep shifting beneath your feet. You must set up permanent systems, whether it's Google alerts on your own name or quarterly check-ins with your personal living room focus group to endlessly monitor your brand. The moment you stop reinventing, you start stagnating. And in today's rapid-fire world, stagnation is just a polite word for obsolete.
Do the audit, buy the saddle, take the pen back. Thanks for joining us in the deep end.